Amen. I was just out of high school, and I started working at a summer camp called Passport. Served on a staff with about 15 others, and the pastor that year was a guy named James Blay. James was from Liberia. Not Liberia, Kentucky, but Liberia, Africa. Like me, James was a big dude who liked sports, so we kicked it off pretty well. Although James and I continued to work that camp every summer, we were never on the same staff again. So we saw each other every summer, but only for a moment. When I moved to Atlanta for seminary, I walked into our first year orientation, and James was sitting there, also beginning his seminary journey. James and I went on to become really good friends. So much so that if you have a high school youth, they've met him, because he and his wife Allison have come and led our last 2 high school retreats. As I grew to know James more and more, I became fascinated by the stories that he would tell of his life. Stories that did not look like the stories that I had growing up. Because James grew up in the middle of a civil war in Liberia. And each story he told helped me understand his worldview a little better each time. There was one story in particular that he told that he gave me the okay to share with you all. He was a kid walking home with his siblings and his mom. And on their way home, they were ushered into an abandoned house because they were walking through a war zone where a battle was getting ready to happen. They were told to hide in the house in an attempt to prevent any civilian casualties. So they raced inside and hid. His mom hid in a bathtub, while the kids hid in different corners around the house in the most secure places they could find. And he reminisced about how they had to lay on the floor for days and had to watch stray bullets fly through the walls around them as they lay there. The story we are getting ready to read from Micah was another story being told in a war zone. The days of unity were long gone, and his side was losing the battle. The Hebrew people had been stomped on, split up, dispersed, and were beaten down. The whole book of Micah is written by a person who looked around and saw nothing good happening. He was an angry prophet. And the whole book, he is just screaming and yelling at the top of his lungs to anyone who will listen. But for just a second, Micah takes a chill pill. And in our scripture, he doesn't stand and scream, but instead he slows down and he is hopeful. In a world at war, he found peace in a promise. Our scripture today comes from Micah 5, 2-5, and it says, "But you, Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be our peace." The best prophecies always get specific with their zip codes. So as Micah begins his prophecy, he draws our attention away from the noise, away from the lights, away from the normal, and sets the attention to a new place, a place where no one was paying any attention. He says, "But you, O Bethlehem, who are one of the little towns of Judah." He names a place so small and so irrelevant that he has to mark the town with another place to try to give people an idea of where he is talking about. He says, "From you, one will come who is to rule." I love this prophecy that Micah lays out because he does the same thing that Jesus will eventually do over and over again. He says, "This is the way things are. This is where you are paying attention, but let me let you in on a little secret. And let me show you something different. Instead of pointing to the capital or some city center, instead of pointing to the same old genocidal king and the endless wars, he puts the old, boring, bloody general away and says, there will be something new. Out of this little nowhere town on the map, there will be a shepherd king, and he will lead us to a new kind of peace. We as a people seem to have a short-term memory, because oftentimes as I look around, I can't help but notice how we seem to have forgotten the words of Micah and the words of so many other biblical figures. We continue to look toward perceived seats of power for our leadership. We look toward political figures or celebrities. We look towards prime ministers, presidents, senators, and athletes, thinking that they can help with my problems. They can provide for the insecurities I have. And instead of the peace we crave, we continue to get the same. And we forget the scripture that is tucked away in a tiny book in the Bible, that is trying its best to be a huge flashing caution sign saying, stop looking that way. It just leads to more of the same, more war and more pain. Look over here, there is something new, something fresh, something different. As we enter December, as we enter this season of hope, peace, joy, and love, my hope for our Sunday of peace today is that we all are reminded of the promise of peace in an unexpected way. We look forward to Advent so much each year because it is a reminder that the way we live is still not what we were going for. And for a few weeks, we can remember the hope that just maybe we can still get to that new way. The way of peace that says, put down the sword, stop the yelling, stop the fighting. The way of peace that says there's something new, something more exciting than all of this. The way of peace that says it's not actually peace if you just kill everyone you don't agree with. So today I want you to ask yourself, where do you find peace? Is it in the same old, same old? Does it look like the things that we are told are important? Or does it look a little like Jesus? Does it look like something new, something that Micah may pause for to say, this is the new way? If we were all here in the sanctuary right now, I would make y'all do a short impromptu small group talk. So I'm just going to picture all of the introverts glaring at me as I ask y'all to maybe pause this service for a second, or to take a moment after it to ask yourself, where do you find peace this year specifically? What does it look like, and does it look like something new? As I have continued to reflect on our Advent theme of an unexpected gift, I thought about my friend Justin, who after graduating high school wanted to follow the path of ministry. His family did not share the same enthusiasm he had about that decision for his life. After refusing to stop pursuing his calling, he was kicked out of his house. He knew he wanted to go to college, but wanted to make sure it was a place that he could study religion. So he applied to go to Georgetown College here in Kentucky with no idea of how he was going to pay for it. After not hearing anything for a while, he received a call from the school's president that said, after hearing his story of his family and his calling, that an anonymous donor had decided to cover the entirety of his expenses to go to school to follow that calling. A while later, having tried to figure out who the donor was, he found out it was a guy named Frank from his hometown. Justin said that to this day, to the best of his knowledge, him and Frank have never met, but that he will forever be thankful for that gift. The unexpected gift of peace can look like a lot of different things. In our scripture, Micah continues the long tradition of naming an unlikely hero from an unlikely place to be the newest mystery in God's supply of heroes. I'm sure to Justin, Frank was an unlikely hero. And to Frank, Justin was probably the same belief that Micah had, where yet again we get reminded that any kid from anywhere can be something special. Peace can also be found in the most unexpected places and the most unexpected ways. As my friend James from the beginning told the story of laying on the floor for days in the middle of that war zone, he always reflects on how his mom was in the other room in the bathtub, and seeking to find peace in the middle of a literal war, she just sang, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me," over and over again. For days she sang the same old hymn. And as stray bullets flew through the house for James and his family, they too found just a little bit of peace when it seemed like there was none. Our story of Micah today is the constant reminder that even timely shepherds can make their way into the history books. We get reminded that a nowhere place like Bethlehem can have more angel sightings in 30 minutes than Rome has in a lifetime. And even more importantly, we are reminded that the gift of peace can come from the most unexpected places.